Hello, everyone. My name is Lane Little, and I'm the director of the Pauly Friedman Art Gallery at Misericordia University in Dallas, Pennsylvania, which is in Northeast Pennsylvania. Thanks for joining us for the Compulsory Measures Artist Roundtable. In this series of 9 conversations, we talk to artists from the show about their creative processes. This series has been made possible in part by the National Endowment for the Humanities CARES grant entitled Humanities in the Time of COVID-19, Fostering Community Dialogue. Today we're talking with Joan Elliott, whose work is over my right shoulder behind me in the gallery here. Joan has a process-oriented approach toward painting. She works with both geometric patterning and landscape imagery. Inspired by recent travels to Spain, Portugal, Turkey, and Uzbekistan, she has researched and documented a wide variety of geometric patterning on site. In her Richmond, Virginia studio, she layers transcribed patterns and thread-like line work to build new arrangements, weaving densely graphic and radiant structures within her paintings. Joan has been an instructor at the Virginia Museum of Fine Arts Studio School for over 25 years. She's been awarded various distinctions, including the Franz and Virginia Bader Fund grant, as well as inclusion in the VMFA exhibition Uncommon Ground. Her work is represented by Reynolds Gallery in Richmond, Virginia, and the Galerie de Belleville in Montreal, Quebec, and is included in many corporate and private collections. She received her BFA in painting from Virginia Commonwealth University. Joan, welcome, and thank you so much for participating in this virtual roundtable series. For those of you watching, you may submit your questions and comments using the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. And Joan, I'm going to let you tell us a little bit about your practice, and then I have some follow-up questions for you.
Thank you. And I'm going to share the screen. Is that okay?
Yes.
I started working with landscape imagery, and I found that this type of imagery really lent itself to a process-driven approach. I combined a lot of drawing with building surfaces. So what I would do was I would wrap canvas around birch panels, either plywood or cradled panels, so that I'd have a rigid support. And onto that, I would broadly layer paint. I would inscribe into the paint. I would sand between layers. I learned just a lot of what I could do with paint, with opacity, with transparency, with glazing, with also creating surfaces that had sort of a jewel-like appearance, especially with some of these etched lines, and then with resulting shapes that I would selectively glaze. The scale of this work was pretty small. It would range from 11-inch square to, say, 20 by 20, and that also, besides the surfaces being so built, lent itself to this object-likeness that I was after. So there came a point where a lot of the work that I was looking at to be inspired was geometric abstraction. And so I really wanted to, grow the work. And I wrote a proposal to the Bader Fund to travel to southern Spain, to Istanbul, and to Venice, to be able to immerse myself in those areas and document tiles, pattern work. Here in southern Spain, you can see that there's stucco, there's tile, there's carved wood, there's a lot of inlaid marble, mosaics. There was just this abundance of pattern and design work. Here, and I did get the grant, so here we are in southern Spain. So I'm going to show a few images from southern Spain of the type of tile work that was abundant in palaces and mosques. And I want to dissect this painting that is in the show right now in the gallery, just dissect it structurally. So there's this pattern that I saw in the Alhambra that I thought could really be useful and almost serving as a grid. It was a repeating pattern. And if you look at the vertical axis, the pattern reflects on both sides. If you look at the horizontal axis, the pattern reflects on both sides. So it's a really versatile and useful pattern to be able to layer with other designs. The painting that, this painting, whoops, has 3 layers. That first one that we just looked at, the second one is this star pattern, and then a top one. So this is the second layer of that. And here's the third layer. And to transcribe these patterns, what I would do would be to take the photo that I documented with and project it with a digital projector onto my studio wall, onto a piece of paper, and have it sized up and work from there. I'd have to do a lot of cleaning up of line work and measuring and symmetry and all that to be able to get it to be usable. So then I would have these paper templates that I layer on a light table. So here I've got that first pattern with the top pattern, and I'm seeing what kind of linear interactions that I can get between those 2 layers. And I decided that I wanted a little bit more. So I threw in the third pattern, and I'm sorry that you can't see it any better, that it's not clearer, but so this was certainly going to give me a lot to work with structure-wise. So here's the resulting painting again. And from all those years of playing with paint, with landscape, learning how to glaze, just learning about oil paints in general, their opacities, their transparencies, I'm able to get a wide range of ways of applying the paint. So here you can see that with putting that second layer design on, I'm doing a little bit of glazing to get some dimension between layers. Here are some little captured areas that I've worked really flat paint onto with a palette knife, so you don't see any brushing. It's almost like a little chip of paint. And if you are able to see the paintings in person, you'll notice when you look at the side of the sheen that there is that variety of flat and kind of glossy or semi-glossy surfaces of the painting, because I haven't covered the whole painting with a varnish, because I really want to work with all of that variety of surface. Here's another piece from the show, and this has 3 patterns stacked on top of each other. Another one, this one's got 3 patterns. And this last one has 2 patterns, especially the second pattern was pretty complex. And you can see in the little ribbon areas, some of them are worked with the paint being put on and then lifted off a bit so it's translucent. And then other areas are opaque. So after going to southern Spain, I went to Venice. And in Venice, explored St. Mark's, you know, amazed by all the mosaics on the walls. But then when you look down, there is a lot of inlaid marble work in the floor. And so I wanted to try to combine some of those designs in with the Moorish designs. So this top layer is a Moorish design, and this is from the Alhambra in Granada. And I'm working with this center area. If you look over here to this area, this is from that last painting that I showed in the gallery. And here is the transcribed pattern that I'm going to be working with. Here is an image of the floor from Venice, from St. Mark's. Lovely Italian design. One thing that was really different with the Italian designs is that they don't reflect. You know, you've got a repeating pattern, but you don't have that kind of centralizedness that you have with the reflecting patterns. So to be able to produce this, this is a 20 by 20 panel that I've wrapped canvas around, and I've given that 2 layers of paint. Here is the paper template that I've come up with, and in between the two, there is graphite transfer paper. So I've laid that down all on top, and with a pen, I've just pressed down onto the line work to transfer the graphite, and the graphite can be removed with solvent. Here on the light table, I'm taking the 2 paper templates and looking to see what kind of interactions, linear interactions, can be, achieved between those 2 layers of design. That's a lot to work with. And I did a process video of of working on this painting. Here you can see the development of going from the Italian design to the Moorish design. And there's so much, it's improvisational. There's so much choice as to how to go about developing the piece. I've included a couple more images from the floors of St. Mark's, designs that I hope to use in the future. And then here's a painting, another 20 by 20 from 2019, where I've started off with my Moorish grid, and I want to show you a video of this painting. So this is just 2 different designs that have been layered, and working a lot, just playing with the paint and trying to get some depth between layers, using glazing, doing some color transitions, just trying to see, what can be done, because it's just endless. And then I've got another progression that I wanted to show you from 2019. This is another 20 by 20 painting. I saw this maple leaf design in Cordoba in southern Spain, and then again at the Grand Mosque of Paris. It covered so many walls in the Grand Mosque of Paris. And so I transcribed that. This is a inlaid marble design from Lisbon. Very different from the linear designs from a lot of the Moorish work. And I've decided to kind of go back to some of my landscape roots. And so for the pieces in 2019, lots of times I would start with a landscape base and then build on top of that with the design. And so that's how that one completed. So Lisbon, Portugal was just a minefield of tile. There was a whole lot of painted tile that was narrative and content inside the buildings, outside the buildings. This is in a convent, in a chapel, the chapel in the convent. And here I was again checking out the floor and saw this inlaid marble piece with this floral motif, thinking I can really use that. So I'm gonna now include a couple of paintings that I've done this year. So this year I've gone ahead and really worked into the landscape part of the paintings more. I've done a lot more development. And in this painting, I have layered 2 designs. This grid-like design is actually a design from Uzbekistan. I was able to go there in 2018. So this is a desert brick pattern. A lot of the buildings in Uzbekistan the exteriors are covered with desert brick, and they would incorporate some designs into that, incorporating poetry, prayers. And with this design, I've just really gone with the basic structure, and I turned it so that it could be parallel to the edges. So it's the foundation grid. And then on top of that, working that flower motif from Lisbon. And then working with translucent paint around areas to tie everything together between the landscape and the design work. And the last painting that I'm going to show from this year, I have incorporated another Italian design that I saw at the floor of St. Mark's with a landscape. And so here, this landscape actually extends the whole canvas, and it's 20 by 20. You can see little bits of landscape in here in the design. And you also see evidence, history of it here in the corners. And I've applied paint, sanded paint, to try to get this wonderful patina there in the corners. I wanted to also show a few painters who have been really influential on my work. And the first would be Gregory Gillespie. He had a show at the Virginia Museum of Fine Arts in the 80s. And I was able, they actually had a reception for him, and I was able to talk to him some afterwards about his work, because I really was in awe of his surfaces. It appeared that paint would be suspended, and I asked him about that, and he talked about using different kinds of gels to achieve that. But his surfaces were just so much more activated than any painting surface that I'd ever seen. I also loved how he just combined so many personal elements in his work. And he would have still life, portrait, design, pulling it all together into having these little very personally symbolic, allegorical pieces. Another painter is Alain Biltereyst, and he's from Brussels. He was born in 1965. And he also references found patterning. And he actually sees a lot of patterns. They're industrial, whether they're on trucks, whether they're logos for industry, manhole covers. He's just always kind of on the prowl for new designs to work with. And he works on panels. Some of them are very, very minimal, simple, very elegant. He shows in the US at Jack Hanley Gallery in Lower East Side in New York. And another influential painter has been Barbara Takenaga. She shows in New York at DC Moore Gallery, and her work, I just love the kind of flexible grids, the organicness, the otherworldliness of her pieces. And this one also has some repetitive mark making in it that's just lovely. So that's the end of what I wanted to present and my work in the gallery now.
Thanks so much. That was a nice tour of your work. I have a lot of questions as well as a couple of student responses if you'd like to hear them. So I'll start with my students. So I had two students writing about your work, and it's a visual analysis. The class is called Subjects and Symbols, and so for most students, it's their first experience writing about art. So one of them wrote, and I believe she was writing about mountain. She wrote that the 6 focuses of the painting all coincide with each other to allow the work to appear clean and refined, but also give off a bright and expressive feel. And then my other student wrote more about the colors. She wrote, the fragments of warm, earthy colors are broken away from each other and separated by areas of cool, light blues. These organic tones imitate those that would be seen in nature. This contrasts with the overlying white pattern that is more representative of man-made decoration. The brush strokes in this semi-translucent line add depth, since the pattern underneath shows through and creates a more natural appearance rather than artificial. the underlying pattern has a texture similar to that of old flooring. It appears scratched and worn. This fits with Elliott's inspiration of the piece, which is tile work she studied in Spain. I thought those were really very well written examples for their first time writing.
Yeah, and very perceptive, and that she's referring to, parts of my background that she's probably unaware of too. So, with the landscape, unless she's been to my website, just the landscape work and seeing a lot of flooring too, that was very inspirational.
When I take students through the galleries, I ask them to imagine each piece as a tile that is a unit and extends far. So imagine a floor full of it, or a wall mosaic. Do these function as units for you when you're thinking about these in your mind's eye? Are you concentrating on that very precise unit, or are you picturing the larger expanse of your memory that inspired this?
Yeah, well, they're each so complex structurally that I'm seeing them as individual units. But since I love to show my work, I can't help but think of installations and how they might work together in a room. This size, I have shown this size just in a square room lined along, which was just, extraordinary. But so both, but mainly as individual pieces.
Well, I'm glad that I have your work in the same gallery as Stephen Pearson, as you showed at the end of your slide, because he works with the translucent duralar and does tracings and layering on both sides of the duralar. And your process with the layering reminds me very strongly of that, although yours is much more precise and mathematical than his is. But now that I've seen your process, I'm glad I put these works together in the gallery.
You must have known.
This is instinctive, I think.
Right.
I'm going to turn on Reni's. So everyone, we have Reni Gower, who is the curator of this show, and I'll let her give her comments about how Joan's work fits in with the rest of the show.
Well, thank you, Lane, and I'm delighted to participate in the conversation. Joan's work fits really amazingly with the rest of the work in that it's this process-driven system, that's redundant, but a way of creating work out of multiple layers, something that's very precise, something that's very, like you say, mathematical. But then there's all this room for nuance once the pattern is kind of laid in for the changes or for intuition or for improvisation to play out. And I think that's a key that you see in all the work in the exhibition. I'm also fascinated with the geometric patterning, the sacred geometry that's evident in all the examples that Joan so kindly shared. And one question that I've had looking at your work, and it was more clear once you showed me your process, is you're inspired by those forms, and you do try to map them pretty accurately, correct? Is that correct?
It is correct, but yet I'm also being pretty liberal with, especially as I've worked with them over the years, of taking bits and also not really replicating the entire design. I'm really trying to make something new from the old. So they're not completely stated and not completely quoted.
Right, and I wouldn't even ever attempt to mathematically plot those patterns as accurately as you. I mean, I make up new ones myself, but there are scholars who would maybe caution us that we're deviating maybe too much from the perfection of the forms, and for me, that doesn't really bother me. I wondered what would, if someone were to challenge you and say, well, that's not a real Islamic form or motif, would you be offended, or would you say great, or do you know what I'm asking you?
Because I'm not trying to replicate you know, the forms in their entirety. I'm wanting to contribute to the, you know, like evolution of the pattern and help create something new.
And then just the last comment that I'd like to make is that this pairing of the more systemized geometry with the more natural organic fluid landscape. I think it's just a beautiful sort of juxtaposition that actually underscores the structure of nature. And if we go down far enough, you know, into the microscopic level, nature will reveal all the patterns that you are actually superimposing upon them. And so I've always been very interested in that play in your work between the more fluid and gestural and improvisational with the more structural patterning on top. Or anyway, I just think it's a beautiful compilation of imagery.
Thank you, Reni. And another artist that I looked at was Mondrian, who was, you know, in the beginning worked with landscape and really enjoyed tree structures, and then that just naturally went into some geometric abstraction.
Right. Yeah, good example.
Yeah.
I like the way these play with with very traditional kinds of arts. When sometimes when people see them, they're thinking of quilt blocks, so that very handmade but precise process that allows for variance in stitching or in sizes that let you know that something has been crafted by hand. And then when you were talking about the tiles, I'm thinking about the layers of glaze and how they allow light to pass through the glaze, but you know, trying to get a very even bake on those materials so that you have a consistency of color isn't always possible. So you have, again, that trace of the handmade where something was allowed to be slightly imperfect. And I see that very much in your work, and that it's comforting to me, really, to think of these as handmade objects.
And there's, in my background, there's a lot of women who worked with their hands in a very tactile way, quilt making, embroidery, you know, needlework. So I just feel like, you know, DNA wise, that's all in me, and it's coming out in this work.
Are you interested in Eastern religions at all? One of my students was referring to these as mandalas, and we were talking about the ephemeral quality of the mandala versus the more permanent quality of a tile. Is that something that plays into your work at all?
You know, well, I've studied different religions, and especially Sufism. And my background's Southern Baptist, so I'm kind of like all
too.
And certainly, spiritual component is extremely important. And my spiritual practice and my art making practice are so parallel. But I'm really, I don't fit into any kind of ism with how I practice, but it's important. Spiritual component.
Mm-hmm. I think that is conveyed through the work really effectively, and the tiling and the mirroring and the symmetry that you achieve, you know, also is a very calming strategy, visual strategy. And even though they're very small, they do pull you in and become quite immersive, even in spite of their small scale. So it does sort of set up this more contemplative space for the viewer as they visually try to unpack how you made them.
Thank you.
And that plays in, I think, to all the work in the exhibition. So not only is it important for you that these things are visually complex and layered and labored, it also becomes something that's translated, hopefully, to the person looking at the work as well.
I think there's going to be a lot of affinities with the projects that you guys are working on now. What are you working on currently? Has your practice changed during the time of lockdown and quarantine?
Well, I started including more landscape in with the work, and I can't travel, and so you know, all the designs that I've worked with have been ones that I actually physically was in front of, eating, smelling, you know, drinking. It was immersion. So this year I do have the opportunity of doing a little bit of searching out for places I can't get to. So I'm working with some designs from Cairo and incorporating some of those into my paintings. I also really want to go to Iran badly, and I don't know when that's going to be. So that could be another opportunity until I get to travel again.
Yeah.
Good. We are, oh, sorry, Reni, did you want to add
I
something?
was just saying
Please
we were
do.
all lamenting in the group chat of the inability to travel and to do our research, and just trying to mine the stuff that we've already collected.
There's a deep sense of loss and grieving, I think, that's playing out a lot in our conversations and in the work. I can't wait to see what 2020 brings for us artistic-wise, because it seems to be awakening a real deep spirit in our artist community.
Yeah, I would agree with that for sure.
Well, everyone, thank you very much for watching this series. Thank you for joining us, Joan and curator Reni Gower. And thank you to the National Endowment for the Humanities and the College of Arts and Sciences here at Misericordia University who sponsored this series. A catalog of this entire exhibition is available as a downloadable purchase from blurb.com. We'll put that link on our website. The full series will be available on our website and YouTube. Please follow us on Instagram and Facebook for more updates on our programs. Thank you again so much, both of you, and thank you for joining us, viewers.
Thank you.
Thank you.